on your weekend?
It was really hard, even now, getting his screams and his face out of my head. It was very hard to sleep for a few months there.
I can't breathe. Those were some of the last words out of Edward Bronstein before he died 2 months before George Floyd uttered the same phrase. It's been 2 years, and Bronstein's family is not giving up on their search for justice. And we're bringing attention to the world water crisis. We'll take you inside Thirst Project and the efforts local students are taking to help make a change.
That's kind of a trend for Kevin De Leon's office. They like to demonize activists. So they say, oh, you actually want people on the streets. And it's not true. It's just patently false.
And later, clearing the homeless. The city of LA is working to move people out of Toriumi Plaza in Little Tokyo and into temporary housing. We'll hear from activists and unhoused people on why they're refusing a free room. Welcome to your weekend on Spectrum News 1. I'm Kate Cagle, leading tonight's show. The story of Edward Bronstein. The 38-year-old father died in March of 2020 while restrained by 6 CHP officers and yelling, "I can't breathe." Those are, of course, the same last words we heard from George Floyd on video 2 months later in the May of 2020. But chances are you hadn't heard about Bronstein because there wasn't video until now. A federal judge ordered CHP to release the video, and an attorney for Bronstein's family made it available. We have to warn you, the images you are about to see are disturbing.
Just relax and stop resisting.
Let me breathe. Let me breathe. Let me breathe.
Her father's painful moments were a secret until now. Brianna Palomino is relieved the public can now see video that had been sealed under a protective order.
It was really hard, even now, getting his screams and his face out of my head. It was very hard to sleep for a few months there.
This is your last opportunity. Otherwise, you're going face down on the mat, and we're going to keep on going.
CHP pulled over her father, Edward Bronstein, in March of 2020. An officer filmed the video of their efforts to get a blood sample. Palomino says her dad had a fear of needles.
I'll do it willingly, I told you. Please don't. Okay. I'll do it willingly. I'll do it willingly.
And that's why he was hesitant to undergo the procedure. 6 officers pin him in a prone position as he shouts repeatedly he can't breathe.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Just stop yelling.
Bronstein eventually loses consciousness and never woke up. The medical examiner says the manner of death was undetermined because of the presence of methamphetamine in Bronstein's system. Quote, due to the absence of autopsy findings of asphyxia or fatal trauma and the presence of methamphetamine, the role of the restraint could not be definitively assessed in contributing to his death.
Just relax and stop resisting.
Let me breathe. Let me breathe.
Pulmonologist Dr. James Pearl told us rolling a person over to their side can relieve pressure on their lungs.
The pressure of being on their stomach, especially if they're being held down, prevents their ability to draw oxygen into the lungs.
While State Attorney General Rob Bonta has made it a priority to investigate deadly use of force cases involving unarmed people, in this case, the AG is representing the officers and in legal filings denies any alleged negligence, unlawful, constitutional, or otherwise wrongful conduct on the part of CHP.
But I'm very glad that it's out. Makes me happy to know that everybody will see it now.
Palomino will always remember the man who raised her and hopes now that the video is public, others will join her call for justice. The reason we've seen this video is because Bronstein's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the CHP back in 2020, and they've also asked LA County DA George Gascon to file criminal charges against the officers. Gascon's office told us they are still reviewing the case. Joining us now is Joshua Ritter. He's a criminal defense attorney and a former LA County prosecutor. Joshua, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I don't think anyone can watch that video and not think of George Floyd. And in that case, Derek Chauvin, one of the officers, ended up being convicted of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Do you think officers could see charges here?
Well, first of all, there's no way to look at that video and not think of it being an absolute tragedy. And then your next thought is, how could this have been avoided? And you have to wonder, police make arrests thousands of times a year. What happened here in this case that led to a person's death when it should have been avoided? As far as charges, I think we're going to have to see what other evidence comes out. Obviously, the prosecutor's office has known about this for some period of time. I've seen the videotape. I imagine that there's more to that videotape. And I mean, video leading up to the interaction where they finally had to use force to draw his blood. I imagine that they gave him several opportunities. None of that is much comfort to his family now that he has passed. But I imagine that the officers are going to say that we were following protocols.
The DA's office confirmed to me that they've had this video for a while, and George Gascon was swept into office partly because he promised to hold cops accountable. Why do you think it is that we're not seeing swifter decisions in these cases, whether they decide to charge the officers or not?
Yeah, that's the problem when you speak big about doing things before you get into office. You say that you're going to prosecute officers, but then when you get into office, you start to realize that these aren't always clear-cut cases. It's not always so black and white. There's a lot of gray here. And I think you saw in that video, the officers do show an incredible amount of patience and restraint until the point that they don't, right? Until the point that they finally say, someone gives the order, we're going to use force, and then they don't care what he has to say. They don't care if he's screaming that he can't breathe. They don't care. In fact, they don't stop even when he loses consciousness. They don't care that he even says that he wanted to cooperate. So it's hard to say, well, I draw the line here, and that's where misconduct is taking place with the police officers. It looks like they were using a lot of restraint and a lot of patience with a recalcitrant suspect, and then at a certain point they just had to make the decision to use force. But does that necessarily mean that it's criminal? And that's where the question becomes far more difficult to answer.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see how much of a factor that autopsy plays into their decision making as well. All right, criminal defense attorney Joshua Ritter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back in just a couple minutes.